July 20th, 2025. We are here to discuss TNA Slammiversary. This is going to probably be a long one, even though the review part won't be that long. There's a whole lot of news and notes we have to get through because Carlos Silva went on a spree during interviews in the lead up to this show, in addition to my analysis of some of the booking decisions that are going on here in TNA. We're going to start with the main event, as we typically do when it comes to major shows like this. Trick Williams defeats Mike Santana and Joe Hendry to retain the TNA World title. The entrances were incredible. Mike Santana got a live entrance. The crowd was absolutely molten for him. Whoop That Trick, sang by choir. Whoop that trick. Whoop that trick. Oh my goodness. So flagrant. So over the top. Hey, I laughed the entire damn time. And then he came out in Booker T's robe when he was Chet Lemon, and he was also doing King Booker with the African accent. Absolutely amazing callback. The match, mid. Okay, it wasn't the best match in the world, but the finish took people by surprise. Frankie Kazarian was on commentary for this match for no reason. When Joe Hendry hit his finish, Kazarian yanked the referee out of the ring to prevent Joe Hendry from winning. There was sort of a mixed reaction to that. It was a positive reaction because the fans overwhelmingly wanted Mike Santana to win. But there was also the Joe Hendry fans who were kind of pissy about that whole thing. Kazarian was then ejected. The match continues. Santana hit his finish on Joe Hendry, and as he was going for the pin, Trick Williams threw him out of the ring and pinned Joe Hendry to win the match. Generic triple threat finish, not the best finish in the world. Fans were pissed, extremely upset. A lot of people online, the know-it-alls of pro wrestling, extremely upset. TNA did a record attendance, over 7,000. We'll talk about that later. But most of these people wanted Mike Santana to win. A lot of people who were just, hey, TNA's got to get their world title back from NXT. Those people wanted one of the two guys to win. They got neither. All right. So let's talk about this for starters. If Trick Williams, as the TNA World Champion, just drew your largest attendance ever, why would you take the title off of him? That should be your first question. Now, if you can say, well, the crowd in New York wanted Mike Santana to win. It's like, sure, they wanted the hometown guy to win. What about all the other shows they're going to do? This is the problem with thinking about what the crowd in the building wants, right? Because the crowd in the building, of course, wants their guy to win. But not every show is going to be in New York City. Again, Trick Williams just drew your biggest number for now, and you're trying to get on TV. So, if business is going well with Trick Williams as the champion, there is no reason at this point in time for him to drop the title. That's point number one. Point number two is we've seen this with the know-it-alls before. There was a point in time, I believe it was back in October of last year or 2 years ago. Bound for Glory, Joe Hendry versus Nick Namath for the world title. The crowd, I was in that crowd. Hell, that was in Detroit. Everybody absolutely molten for Joe Hendry. Wanted Joe Hendry to win more than anything. He lost. Everybody said this was a big gate, big attendance for TNA. You killed it. You killed the territory. The guy was hot. You didn't give him the ball while he was hot. And then they just gave it to him later, and it didn't matter. right? The exact same thing is going to happen here. Mike Santana is going to end up winning the TNA World Championship. It just won't happen in New York City. It's going to likely happen at Bound for Glory in October, which is in Lowell, Massachusetts. The point is to get your top guy over everywhere you go, you know? And it's very typical pro wrestling booking to tease and then deny. Tease and deny. This is Mike Santana's second championship match that he almost won that was taken away from him. The first time it was because of First Class. This time it was because of Joe Hendry and Kazarian and all that stuff, right? So he hasn't had another heads-up singles match with Trick Williams yet. Likely, the next time the two of them have a singles match against each other, Mike Santana is going to win. Now, is that going to be, quote-unquote, too late? No, because if Mike Santana is really over, if he's really the guy who's going to be the face of the franchise, if he's really the guy that drew in this building, if he's really that guy, then he's just going to draw again when they wrestle one-on-one. Right? See, you can't just flip the titles because, well, we're in the challenger city. No, you can't do that. You have to actually stick to your plan. And the plan is for Santana to win the belt somewhere else. And I think the fact that it was a triple threat match was kind of a dead giveaway that Santana was not going to win the title here. It would have been cheap for Trick Williams to lose the belt in a triple threat match. It means more if he loses it one-on-one. So I think that's where we're going to go with this. The know-it-alls are consistently wrong on booking decisions. They're consistently wrong on talent. Look, TNA is in a position where they're trying to climb out of a rut. And what's helping them climb out of this rut is working with NXT. There's no need for them to change what they're doing while it's working. Okay? Sorry. I know everybody likes Mike Santana. I like him. But some of these people who said Mike Santana should win and you're going to kill the crowd if he doesn't win. Yeah, the crowd sometimes should be disappointed because their guy didn't win. But you were the same guys who were telling him to grab the tag rope and he was never going to be shit. Shut up and let the man cook. He's been getting over on his own without your support, without, dirt sheet writers and all these other guys putting him over. You were the guys who told him he wasn't good enough. Shut the fuck up. Let the man cook. And let the people who were watching enjoy the ride. Instead of this is what they try to do. They try to get their fingers on things and manipulate opinions. They've been doing this for years and years. You see it now with Meltzer trying to get people to not like NXT. Alvarez trying to get people to not like Blake Monroe, the new character from Mariah May. This is what the kingmakers and the tastemakers do. They come in and they try to dictate people's opinions on things. These people have outside agendas. Meltzer was upset that NXT ran head-to-head to All In, and he absolutely decimated them in their star ratings. That's the reason he did that. Okay? These guys are outside opinions. It don't mean shit. If these people don't regularly watch TNA, why should their opinions matter? You're not going to watch it anyway. Okay? So it doesn't matter what they think. If they don't regularly cover TNA, if they don't regularly tweet about it, if they don't regularly talk about it, their opinions are irrelevant on the subject of TNA. Okay? So you may see a whole lot of negativity from tastemakers who don't fucking watch the show. Or they were the kinds of guys who say, I can't believe you're watching Indy Hartwell and you're talking about Wheeler Yuta. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Those guys, don't listen to them people. If you're a TNA fan and you're riding with the brand, understand that there is a long-term story being told here. That's going to end with more than likely Mike Santana ended up with the title. I think most of us had kind of expected that Joe Hendry's going to be leaving and going into WWE. He's taken a lot of pins lately. So I think that's kind of the expected move. But Santana seems to be TNA's guy. Let them build him. Let them get the people behind him, not just in New York City, but everywhere they go. Next, there was the TNA Tag Team Championship. The Hardys versus First Class versus the Namath Brothers versus the Rascals. The story going into the match was that the Hardys were questioning whether they still got it. They don't. But that was the question about, hey, if we lose, we might have to consider going our separate ways, which, of course, guaranteed that the Hardys were going to win. Trey Miguel was supposed to be in this match. He was taken out and replaced with Myron Reed, who, should probably be getting a lot more attention. Myron Reed is very, very underrated. And probably is a good... He would be a great heel in TNA. I don't understand why he's still... This Rascals thing ain't working out for everybody involved, is it? Anyway, this match was a typical ladder match. There was a whole lot of ladder spots. The highlights of the match, AJ Francis did a moonsault off the... crazy. Got to give the big man some credit. He overshot on the moonsault, by the way. The people were there, bunched up to catch him, and he leaped over them. And he even said on Twitter that, adrenaline is a motherfucker, and he overshot them, so he doesn't blame them for not catching them. But that was still nuts. He also took a fall onto the ladder as a ladder was tipped over, and he ended up basically crotching himself, and it looked like he was going to tear every ligament in his leg ever. And I'm just surprised he continued walking around. Jeff hit 2 swantons back to back on the Rascals as they were planked upon ladders. And then Jeff summoned a ladder from the roof. This was probably the craziest and most fun part of the match. Jeff goes outside the ring, gets like a remote or something, because they've destroyed all the metal ladders. So now they have a sort of ladder you would get off a helicopter, and it just kind of rolls down, and it's right in position so that you can climb to get the championships, and that becomes the primary ladder that they have to climb. And of course, Jeff ends up climbing the top of the ladder and gets the championship. So the Hardy Boys are once again the TNA Tag Team Champions. I'm not sure this was the right decision, but okay. After this match happens, however, I was sitting here talking to my brother, and I was like, hey, man, they have to be creeping up on having the most tag team championships of all time. I don't know. I lost track of how many times the Hardy Boys have been tag team champions when you look at WWE, TNA, Ring of Honor, etc., etc. It's got to be in the upper dozens. It's got to be like 14, 15 or something like that. Anyway, Bubba Ray Dudley, Bully Ray, he comes out and he challenges the Hardy Boys to one more match, Team 3D / the Dudley Boys versus the Hardys at Bound for Glory in October. There was a lot of confusion. See, I was like, Devon can't wrestle. That was my first thing. Like, can't wrestle. Last I checked, he couldn't pass a physical. Now, how is this going to happen? Didn't he just have back surgery like a year or so ago? This is not a good idea. All right? This is not a good idea. These guys are in their 50s. Jeff is in his late 40s, but might as well round it up to 50. This is not a good idea. This is not a good idea. And it's also a bad idea to have your tag team titles tied up in this feud for another 3 or 4 months. Look, I know TNA is going to do a bunch of tapings and it's not going to seem that long, but technically it will be that long. Now, we haven't heard from Devon because he wasn't there. But I can almost guarantee Bubba is not making challenges unless Devon is already in. So I don't understand this. This is not a good idea. This is going to be terrible. There is no universe in which all of these men, who all of them should be retired, to be quite honest. Even Jeff, as much as I love Jeff, they all should be sitting at home right now. Should still be wrestling and having featured matches on TNA's pay-per-views. They're too damn old. All right? It's just too old. People were laughing at this because it's one thing about pro wrestling. I'm just going to jump to another topic. One thing about pro wrestling is they never give up on people, no matter how old they are. You know? ECW was still pushing Terry Funk even when he was very, very old. Same thing. WWE was still trying to use Dusty Rhodes even when he was super old. Flair, same thing. Undertaker, Dustin, Sting, and AEW. These companies, wrestling companies, they unlike so many other sports properties, obsess a lot over nostalgia. A lot. People wanting to relive their childhood, not wanting to see their heroes just kick their feet up. And a lot of that has to do with wrestler pay. Wrestlers aren't paid as much as basketball players, football players, etc. Another thing that kind of should be alluded to is how wrestlers sort of get better with age, while in traditional sports, athletes are at their best usually when they're younger, when they have fresh legs and less surgeries. Wrestlers tend to get a little bit smarter and they get a little bit better as they get older. But then, of course, they get to an age where you're too old and you physically can't do it anymore. And I think all of these guys involved are at an age where they should not still be working. I know Jeff can still move around. He can still jump and everything. But Jeff is getting stiffer and stiffer with those swantons because he can't beat up his own body. Matt has been on stilts for years. Like I just said, Devon just couldn't pass a physical. And Bubba just has no business working at this age. These guys, this is not a good idea. This is dumb. It's dumb. But I will say this. I'm going to try to look at the positive of it. It's something to attract people because wrestling fans love nostalgia. So there's always going to be people who are going to say, this is going to be awful. I need to see it. I saw a lot of that. I saw a lot of people say, this is going to be really bad, but I need to see it. This is going to be the shits. I need to see it. And I'm one of those people too. This is going to be terrible. Somebody likely going to get hurt, but I do need to see it. Just like Ric Flair's final match was a catastrophe, and people watched it anyway, myself included. This could likely be the retirement match for the Dudleys, and it could very well be a catastrophe. I am definitely concerned for though. Devon probably should not be wrestling. What they may do is have Bubba do all of the work and then Devon do some of the spots, and Devon doesn't take a bump, or at least not a serious bump. Then maybe they can try to get away with that. But this is not smart. It's not a good idea. It's better going with your young horses and building your tag team division around, either First Class or the Rascals. The Rascals just been there forever. They're the closest to young guys you got. Ryan Namath is just so bad at pro wrestling. He's funny, but he's just very bad at pro wrestling. So I understand not wanting him around. But I don't. And I guess this match could happen even if the Dudleys don't challenge for the titles. But it's kind of implied that the Hardys are going to still be the champions at the time. I don't know. But at this point in time, I'm not excited about what I'm hearing between the Dudleys and the Hardys. It sounds ludicrous, sounds dangerous, and it sounds unhealthy. Next, Leon Slater wins the X Division Championship, defeating Moose. Excellent contest here. I'm not one of those people that if somebody I don't like has a good match or a good segment or whatever, I feel the need to downgrade it. I don't like Moose. Before this match even happened, I said Moose needs to lose and then go on a one-way trip to Bolivia. And he lost, which was great. But he really worked hard putting Leon Slater over. And they told a hell of a story. Leon Slater, 20 years old, went out there. And yes, his offense is mostly flips. But this is where Moose, being the veteran, actually was able to be the tent pole in the match. He worked big. Late in the match, Leon Slater is still trying to do chops and clotheslines and stuff like this, and Moose is no-selling them. So you see that Moose is using his size and his experience, but then you have Leon Slater using his speed and his technique. I mean, so many flips and so many counters. A couple of highlights from this match is Moose grabs Leon Slater, and he's like he's going to throw him to the floor. Leon counters it into a hurricanrana, so Moose takes a huge bump from the apron to the floor. Big bump for a guy like him who is, on the older side. And then Leon Slater does a flip over the top rope, and it looks like he's going to do some kind of head scissors over after the flip, but Moose catches him. He looks like he's going to powerbomb him on the ramp, and then Leon Slater kips up a little bit and uses the momentum to do another hurricanrana on the ramp. Again, very cool shit we got here. Leon Slater kicked out of a spear, which was crazy to me because I was like, man, this is going to be something. He actually lifted up Moose and did some kind of spinning torture rack slam. It was pretty crazy. Moose kicked out of Leon Slater's finisher, which is the Swanton 450. It is as absurd as it sounds. And I wrote next to that, get the fuck out of here, because at that point I thought Moose was winning. All right. And I said before, one of the cardinal rules of pro wrestling is get me to believe that everybody in the match can win. If you can get me to believe that anybody in the match can win, I will concede that it was a good match. If I don't at any point in time convinced that the other person can win, then I can't get into it. At this point, when Moose kicked out of his finisher, I was thinking, you know what? Moose is probably going to win this match. Okay. So it wasn't necessarily because Moose hit a big move and I thought he was going to win. It was more or less, okay, this is the guy's finisher, and Moose shrugged it off, so it's not a big deal. We followed this up with a code red on the floor. Now, this is important because he throws Moose back in the ring. Moose does a veteran move and rolls to the far corner because he sees that Leon Slater is going for the Swanton 450 again. And he figures that he had rolled out of distance for the Swanton 450. And he was right. He had rolled out of position for that. But he wasn't too far for him to hit a regular Swanton. And Leon Slater nailed that bitch. It was fantastic. Leaping halfway across the ring. Hit the Swanton. Then he just climbed to the near side and hit the Swanton 450 and won the X Division title. Absolutely tremendous finish. He went out there, celebrated with his family. He's the youngest X Division champion of all time. Well deserved. He's been a marvel for TNA. He's been a guy that they haven't used very well up to this point. So hopefully this will improve. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with him. These are the kinds of things that I should be seeing when your show is struggling. I should be seeing you take chances with younger talent or talent who haven't gotten so much exposure. But this is what TNA should be doing. This is what I've asked TNA to do for months and months. Focus on a young talent. Get a young guy over. They're doing that with Leon Slater. And then they took it to the next level, which putting the belt on him was great. That was fantastic. But then they gave him the AJ Styles segment. And I was like, yeah, they're serious about this guy. All right. They're serious about Leon Slater. So AJ Styles comes out to his TNA theme. The crowd is absolutely just popping all over the place. They're chanting one more match. AJ says that guys like Leon Slater remind guys like him why he loves this business. Says that he reminded everyone that the X Division is not about weight limits, it's about no limits, and that he is the future. Soon as AJ Styles' theme song played, you could see Leon Slater in the corner jumping up and down, just marking the fuck out. All right, like he's really marking out. If he was in his 30s or something like that, I probably would have had a problem with it. But you know, he's a youngster, and he's about to get to do a segment with AJ Styles, who's going to put him over, and he's right to be excited. You know, so this was tremendous. So Leon Slater got a big crowning moment here. Not only did he win the title, but Moose personally gave him the belt, put it around his waist. And then he got to shake the hand of AJ Styles, who put him over as one of the future guys at TNA. This was amazing for this young man. And you know what? He deserves it. You know, he's been grinding in TNA for a while now. This was great. I was very happy. I was overjoyed seeing all of this. And for some people, he had the best match on the show. He had the best match on the show if all you care about is flips and jumps, because that was most of it. But he also told a pretty good story in the ring. A lot of that had to do with Moose's assistance. Next is the humorous decision for JC Jane to win the Knockouts World title. NXT champion JC Jane defeats Knockouts World champion Masha Slamovich to become a double champion. As I prophesized a couple of weeks ago, I thought Masha was going to win because just like so many other people, thought that JC Jane was going to be a transitional champion, and that she was just holding the belt for somebody like Jordynne Grace or somebody like Mariah May, who's just going to take the belt from her. And we kind of had that, and NXT played into that. You know, JC Jane is the most beatable champion. Basically, she's a jabroni. You don't have to worry too much about JC Jane. You know, it was lucky that she beat Stephanie Vaquer. But her character arc since then has been tremendous. Now, she hasn't been winning all of these matches clean, but she has been winning these matches. And she won this match relatively clean because Fatal Influence, despite the fact that they were cheating a lot early, they were actually thrown out early too. But what I like most about this match is that you had Carlos Silva watching. You had a lot of people from the TNA roster watching. You had Johnny Rods, who was Masha Slamovich's trainer. He was watching. And nobody was there to support JC Jane outside of Fallon Henley and Jasmine Nix. Nobody from NXT was there to see if JC would lose. She had no outside support outside of Fatal Influence. That in and of itself is a story. Everybody was concerned in TNA that Masha might lose. Nobody seemed to give a shit about JC Jane. You know, so you could always play on that. And maybe she'll mention that in a promo, that Masha Slamovich had all this support. Her trainers were there. Her comrades were there who worked in the locker room. Who was there for her? Just Jasmine and Fallon. That was it. So that's a story in and of itself. Now, in terms of the match, JC Jane is not the best wrestler of all time. She's a pretty substantial 3-star wrestler, okay? That's about it. She can do the basics, but she has tremendous charisma, personality, and she knows how to get people over. So as Fatal Influence was interfering, we got Zaya Brookside and Lei Ying Lee. They came out there to beat up Fallon and Jasmine Nix. JC Jane tried to hit Masha Slamovich with the Knockouts title, only for it to get snatched away. Well, she tried to hit her with the NXT Women's title, and it was taken away from her. So then JC got the other belt, which was the Knockouts title, and hit Masha Slamovich in the back of the head with it. And I thought that was going to be the finish. And I was about to say, damn! But Masha's kicked out of that. I was very impressed. Then we got to some of the fuckery. JC Jane super kicked the referee by mistake. After that, she basically walked right into Masha Slamovich's snowplow finish. She had the visual pin on JC Jane. A second referee ran to the ring. It was only a 2 count. From that point, Masha Slamovich tried to take advantage. She ended up getting yanked into the second turnbuckle and basically giving herself whiplash. And as she came out of the second turnbuckle, JC Jane hit her finish, a spinning discus forearm, snatched her to the middle of the ring, and pinned her 1, 2, 3 with no help. So, yes, there was substantial cheating from JC Jane in the early part of the match. But when it came down to the 3 count, she was all alone by herself, and she beat Masha Slamovich. I gotta say, I'm very impressed. You know, I like what they're doing with JC Jane. They're taking her character and they put her on a whole new pedestal. Yes, there are a lot of people, if you look at the internet, who are extremely upset because JC Jane is not good enough. She doesn't deserve this. Yada, yada, yada. I don't think that matters at this point, you know. At this point, you see this girl has been in NXT for 4 years. She's not some new booty rookie. When people say, oh, you have this developmental wrestler, it acting like this girl stepped right out of the performance center like she was playing softball 2 years ago and now she's a double champion. No, she's been grinding on the indies before she got to NXT, and she started in NXT at the very bottom, right? Like, she came in through an Evolve contract with no fanfare whatsoever, was the 3rd string and at least several different storylines that she was involved in. She lost almost every match she was in for 3 or 4 years. And now she's finally starting to hit her groove. And she looks like a champion. She acts like one. And she carries herself like one. And she's having the best matches she's ever had. She's on the best run of matches that she's ever had. The match with Jordan, this match, you know, she's having the best matches she's ever had. She's at the peak of her character. This is the right time. If you're going to do this, it's the right time. Now, there's going to be a lot of conversation about TNA coughing up another title to NXT. I look at it from the position of, yes, this one is a little unnecessary. Same time, though, TNA is trying to get a TV contract. They're trying to get a new deal. And they figure it's working for the world title. It can work for the knockouts, too. Now, the person that they have planned to beat JC Jane, I think, is somebody worse than JC Jane. So, I mean, you could be upset that JC Jane is the, knockouts champion, but you're really going to be upset. You're really going to be unhappy when it's Indy Hartwell. All right? You're really going to be unhappy then because Indy sucks. And we'll be talking about that in a second. But JC Jane is a completely competent pro wrestler. She's not going to give you some kind of 5-star classic, but then she doesn't need to. That's not what wrestling is about. She's good at getting heat. She's good at playing a character. And right now, she is what The Miz was in 2011. Okay? She is the underdog who is overachieving, and everybody knows that she's overachieving. And we're just waiting for it to catch up with her. She's already gone beyond being a transitional champion that we all thought she would be. So, I was very impressed by Masha Slamovich, and I've said before that Masha Slamovich is one of the best female wrestlers in the world. Hopefully she ends up with an NXT contract too. She's very good. She's been double champions on the indies with I think she was like double champion in GCW and a bunch of stuff like that where she's been grinding for years. So it's not like Masha Slamovich is some bum. And 9 times out of 10, she's not done with this. They'll probably have a rematch or something like that. But this was a hell of a decision. People who don't like JC Jane are going to be upset. But again, just like in the previous comments I said, see if they talk about TNA regularly. If they're not talking about TNA regularly, but they're talking about it now, then guess what? It worked. because now people are talking about it. They could be talking about it negatively, but now they're talking about it, as opposed to before when they weren't talking about it at all, regardless of who the champion was. Marsha Slamovich was an absolutely phenomenal pro wrestler. They didn't give a fuck. They weren't talking about her, and they didn't care. Now, JC James is the champion. They're going to talk about this. So, it was the right decision. Alright, next, Indy Hartwell defeated Tessa Blanchard. At this point, I was not sure where we were going, and I was almost certain that JC James was going to win the title at this point, because Indy Hartwell is apparently the new face of the women's division when it comes to TNA, which, I mean, good luck with that, because Indy Hartwell is not really good at anything. Tessa Blanchard, for all of her brilliance, could only get so much out of Indy Hartwell. I was more disappointed by this decision than any other decision. Tessa Blanchard was targeting the knee, and all Indy Hartwell had to do was sell it. She wasn't that great at selling it. She's a very limited pro wrestler. She's not great, but she was showing a little bit of fire. They let Indy Hartwell kick out of Tessa's finisher, the Magnum, which is absolutely ridiculous. Why is she kicking out of her finish? I didn't like that. Then we get a sequence, quote unquote, into a finish, which I hate. Sequencing has got to be worse than cinema when it comes to modern pro wrestling. It's the worst, right? So Indy's finisher is called Hurts Donut, when it looks like some kind of full Nelson face buster. Anyway, she does this thing on the ring, the top rope, and whiplashes Tessa Blanchard into another one and pins Tessa clean in the middle of the ring. I was disgusted, thoroughly disgusted. I get that everybody hates Tessa Blanchard, and she's, paying her dues, because we all know that everybody hates her. So they're not going to go out of their way to put her over. But some of the jobs that Tessa has done has been absolutely ridiculous. And this is one of them. This was a ridiculous finish. Anyway, after the match, Indy Hartwell said that she plans to be watching the Knockouts World Title match later, because that's what she came here for. And she was immediately attacked by Tessa during her promo. Tessa was so irate that she even attacked Gia Miller, the ringside interviewer, and she bashed Gia Miller's head against the metal steps again and again. It was played up as being extremely violent, very over the top, and like Gia Miller is just some innocent victim. For years, and this is kind of a sidebar, Gia Miller is a wrestler, okay? She's been wrestling for years, but she doesn't wrestle in TNA. So if you have only seen her in TNA, you won't know that she's a wrestler, because you've never seen her wrestle before. So this is what made it such an impactful moment, is because most of the TNA fans have never seen Gia Miller get beat up. They've never seen her sell or do anything like that. They didn't know that she could. But she is a wrestler, by the way. So Tessa, of course, comes across like a loose cannon. She gets confronted by Santino, who throws her out of the building. And then later, Santino suspends Tessa indefinitely for her actions, which means we won't be seeing Tessa for a while, which basically tell everybody that JC James is the top female heel in TNA, because now Tessa is going to be gone for a while. That's going to be interesting, because essentially what that means is that Fatal Influence are going to be the top female heels in TNA for a little while now. Now, Tessa Blanchard made a little bit of noise when she did some interviews in the lead up to this show. So Tessa claims that in 2024, or I think the year before, because she came back in 2024, so 2023 thereabouts, she was contacted by Scott D'Amore and Gail Kim to return to TNA. This is what she said. And she says that the terms were insulting. That the terms that they wanted to sign her under were insulting, and she was having fun in Mexico and decided to just stay in Mexico. But this time, Moose reached out to her, who is, of course, her friend, and Ariel Shinrer got her to come back. So this was important because Gail Kim, she decided to go on Twitter and say this: I noticed my name being included in this article. I am about clearing up misinformation when I see it. I had zero to do with any contact here. I didn't even know Scott D'Amore contacted this talent in 2024. I mean, Tessa is the woman who has no name. This talent? Ah, I guess they're not on the best terms. I thought they might be, because Gail Kim was one of the big supporters of Tessa, but now Gail Kim, she's got a bit of an attitude when it comes to Carlos Silva. We'll be talking about that in a little bit too. But now she's referring to Tessa as this talent, like she doesn't have a name or something like that. She could have even said, "Look, maybe Tessa was, misunderstood, but I wasn't involved with that." But she referred to it as this talent. I didn't know Scott D'Amore contacted this talent. Well, maybe you should know, since you were running the women's division, right? So we go from Indy Hartwell and Tessa Blanchard, which was not a good one, mostly because of Indy, to something I was completely uninterested in. This is The System plus Matt Cardona. So what were they called? The Hype Bros? No, that wasn't Hype Bros. The Major Bros. Cardona and Myers. Oh my God, they're the shits. And they're teaming up to wrestle Dark State. Nobody cared about this goddamn match. Dark State lost. The less said about this, the better. And to be quite honest, I think Dark State are still undefeated in NXT, but they lost here. And this was an 8-man tag. Again, don't bother. Don't waste your life watching this shit. Who cares? The first match on the show, however, was really good. Might have been the best match on the show. Mustafa Ali defeats Cedric Alexander. Now, I do have mixed feelings about them building their entire story around, their WrestleMania appearance, and Mustafa Ali wanting to slay that dragon, having been embarrassed in front of everybody by losing to Cedric Alexander, and their whole thing about the Cruiserweight division. I don't like that these guys are so far removed from that, and the characters are so far removed from that, but they, I guess it kind of makes sense that Mustafa Ali would stick in his craw, I guess. Anyway, one of the very first dives in this match, Mustafa Ali overshot the dive, and nobody caught him, and he almost broke his neck, because I don't think anybody was paying attention. There have never been more dives in wrestling, and there has never been more people missing the catch. As dives become more and more important in wrestling, there has never been so many people who have missed the catch. This is going to become a problem in the long term. All right? Too many guys are jumping too often, and they're either eating the floor, or the guys are not paying attention. They're going to get their arm or leg or whatever caught up in this thing. Maybe we ought to limit these dives. I don't think everybody should be doing dives. And this was a basic tope suicida, and nobody was paying attention. Cedric was selling and didn't really see Mustafa Ali coming, and everybody else was just fucking standing there. I don't get it. You would think that if everybody's diving now, people should be prepared for it and ready for it, but they're not. Anyway, they decided, okay, that dive didn't work. Let's do another one. So Cedric Alexander does a Michinoku driver off the second rope outside the ring onto the crowd. Now, there was people there to catch Ali this time. Hell of a spot. Pretty insane spot. Cedric Alexander gives Ali a backdrop onto the metal steps, the flat part of the metal stairs. They kicked out of each other's finishers. Tasha Steele, she was ejected from interfering in the match too much. She came back with a chair, however. Cedric Alexander stepped on the chair and kind of kicked it to the side. And then he snatched up Tasha Steele and hit her with the lumbar check, which is, of course, his move where he hits your knees to the back. Now, because he does that, he lays on the mat when he does that. And while he was down, to do that move. Mustafa Ali hit him with the 450 splash and pinned him. Hell of a match. Hell of a finish. This was one of my favorite matches of the night. You know, this and Moose versus Leon Slater were probably the best matches of the night. Very good. Very, very good match. So, I'm not going to go through everything that was on the pre-show, but there are two things worth talking about on the pre-show. Enzo Amore and representatives of Fourth Rope, which is Westside Gunn's wrestling company. They defeated a TNA slap-together team of Steve Macklin, Mance Warner, and Jake Something. Again, I'm praying that somebody in TNA would smarten up and realize that Jake Something has talent and he's massive and that he could be the face of your company. Why you keep treating this guy like a jabroni? I don't know. I have no idea why they don't see anything in this guy. They are embarrassing themselves every time somebody sees him and say, my God, he should be the top guy. And instead, he's losing on the pre-show. It's been going on for way too long. This guy needs an NXT contract immediately. Because then I know for sure, Shawn Michaels at the very least will see Jake Something and say, my God, this guy, unless he's got, you know, all kind of crazy felonies, he should be the top guy in our division. Now, the Fourth Rope team was Enzo Amore, Joshua Bishop, and Zilla Fatu. Zilla Fatu got an extensive entrance from Enzo Amore, who talked about he's got 5 kids. He's not even 25 years old. He's the Fourth Rope world champion, and he spent 5 years in the state pen. I'm like, God damn, he lived more of a life than I have, and I'm damn near twice his age. Shit. 5 kids and 5 years in the pen? Good Lord. Now, Zilla Fatu, of course, he's a pretty good pro wrestler. He's still rough around the edges, a little unprofessional, but still is a very young guy. But every time I've seen him, he's been impressive. He's got a little ways to go before he's ready to be in WWE. But he makes the most out of his indie appearances when he actually makes them. And I don't have a problem with them, but 5 kids, that's crazy. Now, why Zilla is not currently in NXT, there's some questions, I guess, about his criminal record and some of the reasons why he was in prison. There's been a lot of rumors. I don't know what his real name is. I'm not going to look it up. I'm not going to look up what he went to arrested for. I think sometimes once guys, unless this got something to do with children, I think if he served his time and he's trying to change his life, let's let him change his life. Now, if the circumstances are so bad that he shouldn't be seen in public, then that can be known. There are things you can do to people or things that you can do, and I could be like, look, you probably shouldn't be in polite company. If he does something that bad, then yeah, we probably should consider not putting this guy on TV. But if it is what I heard it is, he wasn't the only guy on this roster that was accused of that. There was another guy on this roster that was also accused of the same thing. He also works a lot with Booker T, and Booker T has other people on his Reality of Wrestling roster that has been accused of the same thing. So if that's the case, and I'm not going to say what it is, but you can pretty much put it together if you know about a certain Moose accusation, then, but I don't know, and I'm not going to look it up. I'm going to assume that the young man is out. And since he's out, and he's able to travel and go from state to state, because he lives in California. So if he can move from California to New York, and I'm going to assume that he's free to do whatever he wants to do. And that, he's not a threat to the public, at least not directly. So, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But this match wasn't long at all. It was just basically a showcase for the Fourth Rope. But this was interesting and worth talking about because Joshua Bishop is a young man nobody knows. I have no idea who this guy is. I've watched every Fourth Rope show. I don't remember ever seeing this guy. But this is what I was dumbfounded by. So many of the AEW fans were like, who is this guy? LOL, LOL. When this is the real, I know they've been trying to pawn this off on WWE, but They're the real support all wrestling guys. But for some reason there's a lot of deep hatred about Fourth Rope that I don't really understand. I don't get it. I don't know why. But when it comes to these guys, they have no interest in knowing. They don't really care. Usually if you're watching AEW and you're like, who the fuck is this? They try to tell you, Google it. But in this situation, they didn't know who this guy was and they turned it into a joke. That's what I don't like about these people. And this is why I say, if these people don't like the show, then hey, you don't need to impress them. They're AEW homers. They're hate watching the show. All right. And I don't think that people who hate watch the product should be catered to. But this was a very interesting thing. And this match was nothing, by the way. Okay. The first match on the show was the By Elegance brand. Ash and Heather by Elegance, they defeated the Inspiration, which is Cassie and the other one. I don't remember what her name is. But they were the Iconics in WWE. While they were on the pre-show, I have no idea. I guess because their match was short, they kept it short. There was also a production flub that involved the Inspiration and By Elegance brand later, where production put the camera on them too early, and so they were kind of just preparing for their scene, and it was pretty funny. It was definitely one of the production gaffes you might see in WWE or AEW. The AEW fans just pounced on this. Were like, this is so low rent. This is a pay-per-view, and they're screwing this up. It's like, man, the sound still goes out on AEW shows. Relax, man. Everybody has production flubs. It's part of the business of working live television. You're going to fuck it up. So, it was fine. It wasn't great. It wasn't long at all. So, no reason to lose any sleep. So, Slammiversary, I give it a thumbs up. Despite the fact that there was a stretch there, the 8-man tag, as well as Tessa versus Indy Hartwell, while I was not enthralled in the show, and I was actually just kind of like, oh, this is going to be a long night. But after Indy Hartwell versus Tessa Blanchard, it was actually mostly watchable. I did enjoy JC Jane versus Masha Slamovich. I thought Mustafa Ali versus Cedric Alexander was tremendous. I thought Moose versus Leon Slater was tremendous. I think the main event, the triple threat match, was watchable. I think the ladder match was watchable, but there was nothing special about them. Okay. Now, let's talk about Carlos Silva. So Carlos Silva did a round of interviews. He was discussing the WWE partnership with TNA and how beneficial it has been for them, and that he is within the next 90 days trying to get TNA a new television deal. He even let slip that they were in talks to do Tubi before WWE snatched it up for Evolve. And that, there's also been some whispers that TNA is in discussions with A&E to host Impact. So he was out there basically clearing up some things, making some statements, saying, hey, this is what we're trying to do. This is what I've said before. This is desperation on his behalf. He really wants people to take TNA seriously. He wants people to see TNA. And he was asked about Gail Kim. He was asked about firing Gail Kim, and he says this: I had to make a couple of hard decisions, not just with Gail, but with a few other staff. When things are going a little bit well, that's not the time to sit and be happy. Everyone is chomping to try and get you. We kind of got a little more aggressive in making changes we thought we needed to make to reinvigorate the locker room. Maybe reinvigorate the Knockouts division, which I think we've done. Elevate a few people that needed to be elevated and give them more responsibility. And then he continues by saying, there are always going to be people that are going to be upset. Gail had been there for a long time. Of course, it wasn't an easy decision to make. It was the most difficult decision I had to make so far in running TNA. But what's important is what you do after that, and how you bring people together, and how we bring the locker room together, and how we share what's going on with our talent and help them to feel like they are part of the business. We've done a pretty good job with that over the last 3 or 4 months. So he pretty much says, hey, we wanted to be a little bit more aggressive. We wanted to elevate some new people, get some new eyes on the product. And fans took this as Gail and Scott D'Amore were ruining the Knockouts division. And people are saying as much in various comment sections, and they're attacking Gail and Scott D'Amore for ruining the Knockouts division. Basically saying you're obsessed with former WWE talent. You're not building up any independent talent. You're not focusing on your own homegrown talent. And all of this is very ironic considering what happened on this show, right? Considering JC Jane just won the fucking belt. Very ironic that these people are like, oh, Gail was obsessed with former WWE talent. I can't believe I'm defending fail Gail, but this is people who are just talking out of their ass. So Gail Kim says this. Let's find her first comment. She says, I would argue this. The division fell off when Scott departed. He knew how to book the women. I only produced and could give suggestions for who I wanted on the roster. I didn't have full power, nor was I creative. Most people shouldn't speak on matters they don't know. And then she says, also, all I did was push for new talent, independent talent, and to grow our own homegrown talent, thus proving again how fans think they know what's going on, but 99.8% of you don't. Do I presume to know your life based off what I see on the outside? And she's basically arguing with fans about this. So she says, no one is perfect. I didn't agree with Scott all the time and his ways, but I will say he put importance on the division. Example, 1000th episode, we main evented and had a 30-minute opening segment, and that was consistent. And she's arguing with fans who are talking about how she and Scott D'Amore ruined the Knockouts division. And Gail continued by saying, my loyalty and passion towards the Knockouts division should never be questioned, and how I wanted that division to be upheld. I fought for them on the weekly. Just wanted my thoughts to be clearly delivered. So Carlos Silva didn't say she was doing a bad job. He's just saying she's been here for a while and we're going in a different direction, which I think is absolutely the right thing to do. I think Gail Kim needed to go away. I think the Scott D'Amore era needed to end. Scott D'Amore sucks. And Gail Kim sucked. And it was time for them to go. I get it. People liked them. The talent liked them. The talent were comfortable with them. But it was time to go. It was time to try something different. Because old TNA wasn't working. They're doing new TNA now. And Carlos Silva is the boss. And he wants to try to do his own thing. I mean, as far as we're all concerned right now, Gail Kim is perfectly fine. Her husband is very, very rich. She doesn't need to work unless she wants to. And if she wants to wait for Carlos Silva to call her back, or for Triple H or whatever to call her or whatever, so be it. But the fans who attacked her and basically put words in Carlos Silva's mouth that he did not say. He did not say, well, I'm saying that Gail Kim sucked. He didn't say that. He just said, we needed to go in a different direction. We need to be a little bit more aggressive. That's what he wanted to do. And I think that was smart. You can't have the same people dangling on to your company for years, especially when the company is not doing well. And you don't want to blame them for it because it's not 100% their fault. And like Gail said, she was not in full control. She was only part of the problem. The overall problem was Scott D'Amore. And, he had to go. But this was very interesting. Now, we see that new TNA is breaking attendance records. And all the people who don't talk about the show, don't watch the show, they are befuddled that TNA Slammiversary set a new attendance record for themselves, of course, not for all of wrestling, 7,623. This is a testament to Carlos Silva making smart decisions. Partnering up with WWE, even though on the surface TNA is not getting anything out of this. Their guys are losing matches to NXT talent. They're losing championships to NXT talent. On the surface, it's not working out. In reality, however, when you dig just a little bit deeper, they're doing the best business they've ever done. And this is going back to the days where they were actually on Spike TV, and they were not getting this kind of attendance in the old Asylum era and all that stuff. So they're doing well. That means Carlos Silva is making unpopular for hardcore fans decisions. But these are decisions that are resonating with an audience, because there's people actually leaving their house to come watch this shit, which is something that they've always had problems with. Now they need to get on a better network so that people can actually watch the shit on TV. And so it's going to be very, very interesting, okay, what we see after this. And I have to say, I'm actually quite impressed in TNA. No, TNA is not going to sell out an 18,000 seat building. Get the fuck out of here. That's not going to happen. But it's not anytime soon anyway. But being able to get this kind of number on a big show proves that this partnership is working. Getting AJ Styles to make an appearance, and this might be one of many appearances, because now the door is open for him to get a Hall of Fame induction at Bound for Glory. So now they can probably consider doing that, or maybe even getting one more match out of AJ Styles, maybe. Like, there's a whole lot of opportunities here that people are not looking at. And I've seen all the digs that you can possibly have at TNA, but the proof of the pudding is in the taste. And the people like the taste, at least right now. Now, maybe in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, this whole thing blows up and they go back to 200 people in a parking lot, maybe. But as of right now, they just did the best number they've ever done. So let's see what happens after that. All right, like, share, subscribe. Thank you guys for your time. I'll talk to you good people later. Peace out.